How would you act if you absolutely knew the universe had even more in store for you than you can imagine? What would be your next step now?
Well, hey, and welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And today I have such a special guest. Yanik Silver is joining me. He is a serial entrepreneur. He has been around for a minute, but what I really appreciate about Yanik is he's so down to earth. He's a leader. He facilitates transformative experiences for entrepreneurs that allows them to really access more of who they are. And I was so impressed with Yannick. You know, we met through a mutual friend. He was so generous. He shared with me his Cosmic Journey journal, which is, I'll let him explain it. It's incredible. It's so super cool. And he also shared with me his Cosmic Journey Oracle cards, which are absolutely beautiful. But I want to talk about your journey today, Yannick. I want to talk about like how did you come to the realization that you could pursue your creativity in such a great way and activate through entrepreneurship? All these things we're going to unpack today. Yannick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm excited. Yeah, I mean, the pursuit of full expression, I think, has been the journey, and I think so many of us are on, right? Like, how do we truly put our full selves out into the world without hiding? And I'm not going to lie, it's scary at times, and you can kind of stair step into it sometimes, or sometimes you make big, bold leaps into it. And so, to me, entrepreneurship is the greatest path for that. It's truly a spiritual journey. I started I don't know, 25, 26 years ago, on my own thing, and then grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I grew up in a medical equipment sales and service business with my father. So at 14 years old, I was telemarketing. At 16, I was out on the road cold calling. So I got very early sales and marketing background, and then helped grow my dad's business to a national player from a regional player by using direct response marketing that I learned. And I was just fascinated by that idea that you can get somebody to give you money or raise their hand because I didn't want to cold call 50-year-old doctors as a 17-year-old kid anymore. That was very painful.
Yeah.
So that's part of
Yeah.
it.
I love it. So, how did you figure out that it was expression? Like it was the authentic expression was the thing that you wanted to cultivate or that you wanted to really lean into? Like was that just an organic thing that happened over time or did something happen that made you realize, ooh, creativity, expression, authenticity, that's where it's at?
Yeah, I think it's definitely over time. And like I said, there's times when there's big, bold leaps for it. And it's like I have this aspect of or notion of following your heart is frequently scary, but never wrong. And I can look back at times where it's like leaving my dad's business was scary because he wanted me to take it over. I thought I was going to take it over, but then I'm like, no, this doesn't feel like what I want to do. And so that big leap originally was into the internet digital marketing world, where I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with this idea for something called instant sales letters. And they're little fill in the blank sales letter templates. And that became my first $1 million product. And after a couple months, people are like, whoa, how did you do that? Could you teach me? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So then I started teaching people how to take their knowledge and information and sell it online. And that went really well. I was making a lot of money and had a hot sports car I was driving and great reputation in that space, which isn't that easy. And because I always believed in, actually at 17 years old, I wrote something in my journal, which was I get rich by enriching others 10x to 100x in return. And so I've always believed in this idea of like value creation, right? Like so you can't it's like impossible to have that scale tipped in the wrong favor. Like if you're continually delivering value, then you're going to get rewarded. And sometimes it's not immediate, but it's not like from that exact person sometimes, but it's going to show up. And so that's the way I've always lived my life. And I was really blessed, I think, to have incredible mentors via audio. I would drive around with all these tapes playing in my car with Earl Nightingale and Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy, and then a bunch of other marketing people, Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy, and you name it. Like I got a really great education very early on because I believed in what Earl Nightingale said: is you spend an hour a day for 3 years, and you become an expert. If you do it for 5 years, you can become a world class expert. So I was fascinated again by that direct response, copywriting, influence psychology, but for a way of doing it with ethics. And so I would do like 2 or 3 hours a day and just be fascinated by it. And so this idea of expression, like it comes from these moments that are like, you're choosing yourself even more than maybe before. And so it's like really easy. So I've seen this play out a lot in a micro and a macro way where stage one of a business is like you're jumping out of the airplane, assembling the parachute on the way down. You're like, I got a great idea. I think it'll work. And then you're doing it, no assembly instructions is in there. But now, there's more and more people, like you and other podcasts and other information. And so there's more and more things. But still, you're taking that leap. And then stage two is like, oh, awesome, it worked. And you start seeing like, it starts going up. You get PR, you get press, you get the profits are going up. And then at some point, it kind of will level off, and it's either you've fallen out of love with what it is, or maybe you've exited, or something has happened that requires a big leap. And so I see a lot of entrepreneurs, you can either go two directions. One is that golden handcuffs, where it feels like your soul is dying a little bit every day when you're not truly doing what you're meant to be doing. Or you make this really big leap, which is connecting your head, which is your business side, your heart, which is the impact you want to make, and then your higher purpose, like why are you even here? Connecting all of that requires a big leap into that next stage. And that requires usually giving up your identity of who you were before. And what, again, this is big time self-expression and what's happening there. So that's why business is that greatest spiritual journey. And so I experienced that about 18 years ago when I asked myself a really simple question, Amanda, which was, am I happy? Would I be happy doing what I'm doing 10 years from now? And so when I got really honest in my journal, the answer was no. And that's where Maverick was born, which is another level of self-expression, which was a combination of growth, impact, and fun. So deep, impactful evolutionary work, fun, and then impact, like making a difference in the world and charitable contributions. And so that felt like a full expression. And then it was the first time ever that the business went sideways. And I'm like, what is happening here?
So you were like totally lined up, and then the business went sideways.
Yeah, and I had 7, 8 other things that hit the seven-figure mark. So I was like, okay, well, what's happening? And really, what happened was the same playbook wasn't working anymore, and it was just really, really fascinating. And so I went back into I was a bit of a weird kid, as you might imagine. At like 12 and 13, I'm reading books on parapsychology and sacred sites and UFOs, and I was just into everything. I was so fascinated by all of it, and put it all away. Went into the entrepreneurial world, and then like when things weren't working, I'm like, okay, well, what's happening? And it really forced me to go back into like, I'd been studying personal growth, self-development for, I don't know, 20 years at that point. Like what is happening? So breaking it down to like having a good day equals a good week equals a good month. And then like I went through like a really deep, like a dark depression. And originally it was a depression because I wasn't feeling happy, but what I was doing. And then this was like, okay, well, this is meant to make you happy and this is not working. Like, so it was like a real it was just like really threw me for a loop, and so it really made me go back to like deep like why. And the why wasn't building an adventure travel company for entrepreneurs. It was, how do we change the way business is played? So I really had to connect deeply into the why. And then also I asked my 111-year-old self, what do I need to know? And so this is a great process. And so I use my non-dominant hand, and so I'm right-handed. So most people are right-handed. So use your left hand and answer. You can ask your 111-year-old self. You can ask your 11-year-old self. You can ask the universe, whatever you want. But 111 is a good frame because it's like that person has seen everything, your successes, quote unquote, your failures, your loves, your losses, like all of it. And so from that standpoint, I wrote light 1,000 suns who each have the potential to light another 1,000 suns. And I'm like, oh, damn, that's pretty interesting. So that's become my North Star and compass for everything. And so that's why, this idea of full expression and really evolution is at the core of everything that I'm doing. And as a kid, I wanted to be a professional hockey player and a cartoonist in the off season. And so that was my original goal. And it was really fascinating. So the art started coming back in my journaling. I put it away for a long time because my parents saw my art talent, but then they put me in a fine arts program. And I did not
Ooh,
want
and
to
it
draw.
took all of the joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was like I'm drawing like still lifes and whatever oils and fruit bowls, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And so like yeah, it took all the joy out of it. And then it took me a long time to come back to it in my journal. And then I was on deadline for this book called Evolved Enterprise, which was all about how do you create an impact in your business, which is part of this journey of like finding the puzzle pieces from when things were kind of going sideways and connecting to amazing icons like Richard Branson or Sarah Blakely or Tony Hsieh from Zappos, or who had pieces of the puzzle, but then also unknown people that had other pieces of this framework that became the Evolved Enterprise. And so I was on deadline and I was supposed to get it done at midnight, and I'm like, and I put like a year and a half of my life into this. I felt like I put my whole heart and soul into this book. And then I'm like, oh, it's missing something. I'm like, oh, I can add my doodles. And I got this burst of energy. And that's, by the way, how you're going to know if you're on track. Like follow the energy, follow that lightness, follow that play. And so I was up to like 5 o'clock in the morning doodling different illustrations for the book. And that was the first time ever that was like an expression of me that was starting to come back out again and combine with the entrepreneurial space.
So good, so good. So many people that I've talked to lately, they're getting, well, everybody's getting disrupted, with AI coming about and just the way that social media has really evolved to be very not just ubiquitous, but it's forming and changing the habits that people have. And every time you swipe, it's like another judgment, another comparison, and it's this hyper consumption, is really causing a lot of change for how people spend their time, how they're spending their money, and their mental health and their connections and their relationships. So, like, coming back to like my question, a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm talking to these days, they are like a duck on water. They're trying to keep up those appearances, but underneath they're like, "Ah, I'm not making the sales that I did. I'm not experiencing the flow that I had. I'm not finding the good collaborators." And I'm noticing a lot more people like isolating, retreating. There's an energy that seems to be kind of pushing people. They seem like they're getting pushed down, and they're trying to like stiff upper lip, just courage your way through it. What would you say to that person who's perhaps maybe they're fearful of launching the new thing or pivoting the new thing? I mean, you've done so many different businesses. You've clearly unlocked or tapped into a capacity for embracing change. And sometimes change is not something that it's just ideated that came from within. Sometimes a change is like because, like you said, the playbook doesn't work anymore. Or, you had this idea intent that in that old context, sure, good idea, but now the context has changed. What would you say to that person who's maybe fighting the reality of the need for change?
Yeah, well, change is inevitable. You're either going to embrace it or you're going to kind of get hit on the head, bonked on the head by the universe harder and harder and harder. So for me, with Maverick, the very first trip that we did was a Baja Dune buggy trip, and I lost $40,000. I'm like, whatever, it's okay. It's a new business. And after about $400,000, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. But I could have easily gone back to the internet world and just done what I was doing. But if again, it would feel like your soul is dying a little bit inside, and I wasn't willing to do that. So I was willing to embrace that unknown and sit in it. And then it came to a head again where we had a lot of bills piling up, and the same playbook was not working because I had cut off a bunch of other stuff that was doing really well because it didn't feel like it was in full alignment. And some people are like, that's kind of crazy. Like, I shut down a mastermind group that was making a couple $100,000 in net profit, and but I'm like, this is not fully what I want to do. And so it came a point where I was either going to sell my ticket to space on Virgin Galactic or sell my Aston Martin. And so I decided I was going to sell my Aston Martin, and then of course, like, especially guys, I think, but you have your identity really tapped into, like, a car or your outside world in some way. And I could have easily like leased a Mercedes or BMW or whatever, just keep up appearances. And I'm like, no, I'm going to sit in this, like, what is it here, and allow that identity to unravel. And I had like a sort of a beat up MDX, an Acura MDX that we had as a third car. And at some point, I started really feeling so much gratitude and appreciation for it. I'm like, oh, I can throw my paddle boards in here and not worry about the mud from the river. I don't have to get it detailed all the time. I don't have to pay the dude $20 at valet so he doesn't Ferris Bueller my car. And I just started like having so much joy and appreciation for the car, and actually synchronicities and magic would start lining up. Like I remember listening to an audio program on there about oneness, and it was like the odometer, or yeah, the odometer was like, I forgot what it was, but exactly at the number and the same number of like what the audio was at. And like it was like all this magical stuff aligning. And to me, synchronicities are like my love language. And I think synchronicities are a love letter from the universe across time and space for you. So paying attention to those synchronicities are going to tell you, the right direction. And so it got to that spot of like, okay, and now I feel good to buy another car, and it wasn't another hot sports car. Like I didn't really need that anymore. So I got a really cool Mini Cooper, and it just fits my
Oh, I
personality.
love
It's
a Mini
quirky.
Cooper. That's a great car. I love that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's like,
you mentioned something kind of cool. Like you were like, well, for guys, maybe we're externalizing it through our possessions, right? And speaking as a woman, we also externalize, and it's actually the same thing going on that you're describing. It's like we externalize maybe through like other things. Maybe it's not a sports car, but for me, it was like externalizing through the quality of care that I'm offering my family and like how happy those
mm,
relationships are outside of me. But again, it just like same thing of trying to like keep up with the Joneses or the expectations of the former identity instead of
yeah,
examining like, well, if we did just like surrender for a sec here and imagine a new way and allow that new way, perhaps that new way is even better. And when I work with people, I do see that externalization factor of like, well, my bank account says, or my friend count says, or my view count says. And it's like, well, it's actually the narrative or the story that you're telling about those things more so than the things. So write a new story.
yeah, exactly. Or like to me, it's really about what's the intentionality of all those things, or what's the underlying aspect of it, or the energy of it. So like I wrote in my journal for my 40th birthday, like I wanted to be having this much in my bank account. I wanted to hang out with this person for my birthday, with different like celebrities. I was like, I wanted to drive this particular car, this Fisker Karma, and like all these other things. And then I read it a couple years later on my actual 40th birthday, and I showed it to my wife. She's like, "Oh, or, are you sad that these didn't happen?" And I'm like, and I stopped, thought about it for a moment. I'm like, no, not really, because the money represented freedom to go work on projects that I wanted to do with people that I want. I'm like, I had that. The car actually was a bit of a lemon anyway, so I'm happy I didn't get that car. And then the celebrity thing, like, it was like a local sports team, and I'm like, I got an even better invitation. Like I was actually on my 40th birthday. I was in Mojave Desert watching the Virgin or Spaceship Two roll out of the spaceship, the actual inaugural sort of rollout of it. And then I got invited by Branson, by Richard, to a safari like a month later. So it's like that was even better. So I believe in this aspect, and I have this on my desk to kind of remind me, which is trust the universe has even more in store for you than you can imagine. And then you can kind of read the rest of that. But it's that's the simple aspect, right? Like just really trusting that the universe has even more than you can imagine available for you. And especially when you're in alignment, like like Richard's been a big business hero of mine, and originally way back before I met him, I wrote like have lunch with Richard Branson. And if I got exactly what I wanted, I would have been happy. And now I've had like 50 lunches with him, 60, I don't
I
know,
was
because we
gonna
do an
say,
annual
I mean,
trip.
like, you opened yourself up to the possibility of something that you really, really want, what you really want to desire. And I love what you're saying about like the timing, because there's just so many examples that I can point to as well, where it was like, this is a desire, let's call it in. And then the thing I got was just so much like bigger, better, but it was also still in the direction of what I had asked for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, our desires definitely point us towards things. And it's like also being able to, I think, discern between what's our small selves want and what's almost like what's I'm just going to use a very general term, what's the universe pointing us to? And the only way that that can really come is to me by stillness, by more awareness, by practices like journaling or meditation or deep contemplation or prayer, and then not prayer from like, oh hey, God in the sky, can you give me the slot machine thing that I'm asking for, but really this two-way aspect. And I really look at our hands as like the hands of the universe. And so how do we, and our hands, our hearts, like how do we embody what is the evolutionary impulse that's coming through us? And the only way we get to that is by becoming a clearer vessel.
So good. Yannick, what is the best way for people to keep up with you and learn more, hear more?
Yeah, I mean, on Amazon, I've got a couple books that are great. And then I also have something new I'm doing, which is a daily doodle, but it's really more than a doodle. It's called a 1000 Sun Sparks. So the number 1000, and this idea of like a little sun spark can turn into a sun. And it's like every single day I'm putting out a new illustration. And the art has been, again, this really great full expression. And I see birthing a new, almost like alchemical art that feels like it's coming through me. So I feel like, Amanda, we should pull a card to leave people with.
Let's do it. Okay, so completely mix these up. I'm not an expert at this,
Yeah.
but I think that's kind
Okay.
of
You
the
don't have
point.
to
Is
be.
you just let it happen, right?
Yes.
So I'm gonna pull a card super randomly, shuffle things. Here we go. Here we go. trust and act
Oh, nice.
accordingly.
That's pretty perfect. Yeah. So that's the only piece of art that I pulled out. So trust and act accordingly. So we'll leave you with what it says. Trust and act accordingly. How would you act if you absolutely Yeah. How would you act if you absolutely knew the universe had even more in store for you than you can imagine? What would be your next step now? Whatever we think we want typically comes from our small selves, and that's not always in alignment with our divine destiny unfolding. Think back to when you made significant leaps. Where did the support come from? Consider what kind of allies, resources, and even synchronistic opportunities have opened up only after you've acted. The universe is always nudging us forward and revealing itself in our crazy ideas and perfect nature. Trust. So the prompt for everyone is, what would I do right now if I fully trusted that I'm supported no matter what? Drop.
Trust. That's a message, man. And hey, listener, if it resonated, make sure you let us know in the comments below. Be sure to grab the link to this episode wherever you happen to be watching and just share it with a friend. Three of your friends actually. They could use an uplift, I am sure. And Yana, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And listener, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you're like me, I watch for notifications and then I sometimes forget to do the subscribey thingy. That helps a lot. And if you're really loving the show and you want to hear from more amazing people like Yannick, do make sure you pop by and leave us an honest review because it helps people to decide whether they want to spend time with us or not. And we are so appreciative of those 2 minutes. Until the next time, just remember one foot in front of the other, do what matters, and we will see you in another episode.